Hello, Wheeler Centre. How are we? Excellent, excellent. First of all, I respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional land of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. Welcome all to the Wheeler Centre and the Freeplay Independent Games Festival. First of all, thank you very much for taking time to come here to this event instead of staying at home and downloading Game of Thrones. The first 5 episodes. You can do that later in a legally approved way. Tonight's panel is called Level Up, going deeper into the video game culture, aka everything you wanted to know about gaming culture but too afraid to ask. This is a safe space, no question will be too geeky for us. So please welcome our panel of industry experts and game fanatics, Lena Vandita, Vanessa Toholka. Yes, got it right. And Scott Edgar.
Scott.
Hi.
Edgar.
My name's Lawrence Leung. I'm your host this evening. It's my pleasure to be here at Freeplay amongst all the talented gamers and developers here tonight. I know a lot of people look at me and think, yes, he definitely works in the computer game development industry. I don't, that's racist. In many ways, I am a noob, to use the parlance. These are the true experts. I'm just MC Jon Snow. I literally know nothing about modern games. I played lots of games in my childhood. I grew up with an Apple IIe, respect. It had a green screen. I played Load Runner, Choplifter all the time. And then we graduated to a Wang PC, and I was teased mercilessly at school for having a slow-running Wang. And then Dad bought an Amstrad, and it had awesome, amazing VGA graphics, 16 colours. And then the game and console that changed my life was N64 and GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Yep, the only game in history that is better than the movie it's based on. Then there was a gap of about a decade and a half as I became interested in other hobbies like filmmaking, comedy, and not talking to girls. I could only stand back and watch as games develop in complexity with a growing culture, and it has become an incredibly advanced art form. And I've only just started creeping back into the world of gaming, obviously by my ubiquitous iPhone with mobile apps like Candy Crush, Monument Valley, Framed, which is a Melbourne-made game. Yeah. Yep. And a new one called Tinder, which is a multiplayer game where you swipe and destroy all remnants of dignity. This is why I'm interested in this panel today, and I'm so glad to be on it because I personally want to get back into the world of gaming and this new gaming culture. Of course, it's expanding and will soon be the most dominant entertainment form of the 20th century. To put it in perspective, 2 years ago, Frozen was the biggest grossing movie, $1.2 billion worldwide. But in the same year, Grand Theft Auto 5 generated nearly $2 billion and sold 33 million copies and outsold the entire global music industry that year. Come on, games, yeah.
As a musician, I'm not so thrilled about that.
Not to mention the incredible independent games popping up and redefining the idea of what games can be and finding new diverse kinds of players that aren't the usual stereotype of a dude in a basement. So with new technologies just around the corner, including motion sensors and VR, it's exciting to see where all this is going to go next. So today we have our industry experts, an industry expert, a developer and a gaming fanatic talking about their experiences of the gaming world. Are you ready for level 1? Please welcome our first speaker, Vanessa Toholka. Oh, I'm going to intro you. Good job. Sorry, for those who don't know, Vanessa is a knowledge management consultant with over 14 years' experience working in online content and strategy. She specialises in research and development, producing digital applications for the education, media and legal industries. Currently working in the legal industry, she Previously spent 5 years working in new media and digital services at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Vanessa was a developer/producer for the ABC local Gateway and executive producer of the award-winning online documentary Sounds Like Techno. Vanessa is a board member of the Freeplay Independent Games Festival and a radio broadcaster with Triple R's weekly technology computing show, Bite Into It. Now smash those hands together and welcome Vanessa Toholka.
Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to get my little presentation up here. All right, this is just a little bit of a favourite of mine, and people who've been past attendees of Freeplay Festival might be familiar with my passion for NetHack. This belies my age a little bit as well. I'm going to talk to you a bit tonight about what game culture was to me and how it's changed over time. And I've only got 5 minutes, so it's going to be a really quick run-through. But I was lucky enough to have parents who both got interested in programming when I was quite young. So the first computer came into the house in the late 80s, and suddenly we had a 286 there. Similar to Lawrence, it was an Amstrad, and we were encouraged to get involved in games just for something to get the kids on the computer for. So some of the things that we played were things like NetHack. We had to figure out how to install these games, so this is sort of auto-playing through, I think. Oh, let's just take that back. We had to figure out how to install the games, how to make them run properly, how to play them, because there was very little documentation. And my two siblings and I would share a lot of information, and that's what games culture was to us. It was a little triumvirate of passion about games and things we'd discovered, and little techniques and tricks. And also figuring out how to upgrade the computer so we could play things faster. Soon we outstripped our parents in terms of the hardware requirements for our machines at home, and that was pretty exciting. So we'd be playing really fun games like the old Rampage, just a real hack 'em kind of mash the buttons type of game that your parents were freaked out that you're going to ruin the most expensive technology in the house. Test drive, years later when I went for my L plates, the guy was like, "Are you sure you haven't driven before?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've driven before. The Lotus Elise was my vehicle of choice." I had my own little heroes. It was nice to have a female video game character that you could play, and Chun-Li was my favourite. Sure, she wore a bit of a sexy outfit, but she still had the strong thighs. She had to deliver those 1,000 butterfly kicks. So we can talk about the stereotypes of female characters in games, but actually early on they were trying to do some pretty good things, and I think Ryu and Ken were pretty sexy in this series as well. So it's not like it was that unbalanced. There could have been more female characters, that would have been good. So the world of online gaming kind of hit us all of a sudden, and it changed everything. We went from our little world of sibling knowledge and sharing all of our tips and upgrading our computers to suddenly needing incredibly fast graphics cards, using headsets while we played, and having a really different sort of communication with the people we played with. You'd meet people online on servers, you'd make new friends, you'd discover a lot of jerks, you'd have in-channel chat, and that was pretty informative. And when people discovered you were a woman the first time they heard your voice over a headset, that was an interesting experience as well. Good and bad and what have you. I don't know why this is jumping through. My brother will not thank me for sharing this photo of the clan that we played with. He's over on the far left there. You're welcome, Tim. But my brother really was my entree into those games. He started playing them, and he wanted me to understand what he was going through. And there I was, studying computing, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with a computing degree, and making games, seemed like a real possibility. So I jumped in. Sometimes we'd switch characters online, I'd play him, he'd play me. My stats were pretty terrible, so he'd help me level up a bit. And that's what we'd do. And I'd help him build little worlds. And he's like, "Oh, you're really good at the graphics side, you can do that." I'm like, "Actually, I'm a far better programmer. Let's stick to that for me." did dabble in some games after university. Things like Braid came out and the hype was just too great for me to ignore, and you hear about really interesting storytelling and beautiful graphics always suck me in as well. And so I did dabble with some of those things there, but mostly I was interested in developing. So when I started running Bite Into It, I had a perfect opportunity to meet a lot of local developers here. People like Luke Miller from my ex-boyfriend, the Space Tyrant fame, the brothers behind Kumobius, Tom and James Greenaway, and they later put out Duet, which was just wild, and a really unique experience tapping into local composers and that sort of thing. So we're just going to forget the fact that those slides have a mind of their own.
That's mine.
Yeah.
Don't look.
Don't look.
It's my
Oh,
slide.
that's your slide.
But the other thing that Bite Into It opened up for me was how vibrant the developer community had become, how much games engines had come along, and how open the making of games was these days. I met a wonderful games developer, Amani Nassim, in Melbourne. She introduced me to some people she'd studied with in Copenhagen, and I got to do a tour of the Unity offices there and really have a sense of where games are headed and how passionate people are, and all the different sorts of things they're demanding from the people who make the platforms. And that was super exciting. So I think you can see that games culture has just gone from the personal and the home-based to completely being international and really diverse in terms of what it offers. And it continues to fascinate me. I can see it changing a lot more in the future, and I hope that I fit within your 5-minute time frame. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Our next speaker tonight is a writer, game developer and teacher from Melbourne. Amongst others, she has worked on apps for the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the Melbourne Writers' Festival and Tin Man Games. As a freelancer for the last 4 years, she has many tales from the trenches about making games and has recently started teaching interactive narrative at both RMIT and Swinburne. Lena van Deventer co-founded the non-profit organisation Widget, Women in Development, Games and Everything Tech, to support women developers that make cool stuff and to encourage women who are curious about making cool stuff and give it a go in a safe, supportive community. Please welcome onto the stage, Lena.
If my slides do what Vanessa's slides were doing, I'm going to freak out, just so you know. There'll be much flapping of
Don't
the
worry,
arms.
Lena, I'm no good with technology.
She's been faking it all this time. I don't even know how to press play. How do I do that? I don't like PowerPoint. It's happening
What
already.
about, is spacebar? Spacebar? Maybe?
Is it F5?
F5, F5? Could be
No.
F5. Could be
I'm just
Q.
going to type into a forum and ask.
Jeff, save me.
There'll be a YouTube clip of a 15-year-old who will teach this better than anyone.
And it'll show us how to play classical guitar at the same time.
Sorry about that. I am a tech professional, believe it or not. I just don't like Windows. I make games. Thank you for having me tonight. And I talk about making games to students. And I try to do it without crying, and sometimes that's harder than it sounds, harder than it should be. But I want to try and focus on the positives tonight. These are some of the games that I've worked on. I'd like to take you through my last major project, however, tonight. It sadly is never to be born. So you have it and a very exclusive sneak peek on the thing that will never be tonight. This serves as an example of how invigorating games can be, how silly they can be, how fun they can be, and how hard it is, and how sometimes the best course of action is to kiss it, thank it for what it's taught you, and pop it in a drawer. That's very hard to do. I'm not going to cry, don't worry. So this was my first massive work that was mostly solo, that I was writing on my own. My first solo gig that wasn't copywriting. I'd done copywriting before. On Run That Town up the top, I was a senior copywriter on that project. I was so honoured and excited when presented with the brief and asked to write a game book for an existing IP that was owned by some really lovely humans. The company that hired me was also full of really lovely humans, and I felt so lucky, and I still do. I feel lucky about this whole thing. I know people say we broke up amicably or whatever, and you go, yeah, right. But we actually let this project go together, and it was amicable for real. I promise, legit. So the brief was this. Thank you for fixing my slide, Jeff, before too. Write a prequel to an existing point-and-click dating sim. Point-and-click being much like the Monkey Island games of our youth, or you just point-and-click, you don't have to learn any difficult maneuvers or anything like that. And dating sim is dating simulator, which sounds worse than it is. They're actually really amazing. So it used existing characters. I couldn't kill anyone off. It was a prequel. And any character progression reached by the end of the book had to lead to where the next game started. So I was kind of restricted in that way. But it actually worked out to be a good restriction in some ways. It was set in a Japanese high school with a blonde American protagonist. I'm Australian. There were supernatural elements in this universe. It had to be a 250-section game book, which is quite small for game books, believe it or not, but it averages about 50,000 words, so it's not nothing. Over 170 different choices were involved in my book. So here's what it ended up featuring. Meeting, yeah, video games are ridiculous. Meeting at an airport where you discover your dreamy Japanese pen pal is actually a total jerk who doesn't like you in real life because you're not as demure as he thought you were. A fight with said jerk over the presidency of the student council, culminating in a contest to make the largest onigiri, as you do, which is a huge ball of rice filled with tuna and Kewpie mayonnaise, and delicious. They got over 3 stories tall in the final battle. As you do. It had gravity machines, it had brainworms, it had baby dragons, it had giant catfish that cause earthquakes, of course. What else causes earthquakes? Nobody knows. A time-travelling piece of rotten sentient sushi that got fresher as you progressed, as he was travelling in the opposite direction to you in time and space. Yeah, see? It's ridiculous. But it wasn't all fun and coming up with those kinds of ideas. I had to change gears from writing more traditional fiction into writing interactive fiction. And I didn't really think it would be that different when I started, but I was so wrong. Ron, I think, might be in the audience. This is an image care of Ron Killeen, age 11. He's now 44. This is a game flow graph. This is the mind map of the actual story itself. This is Firetop Mountain by Fighting Fantasy's Firetop Mountain, a very classic piece of interactive fiction that is in many of our hearts. People who are really into it plotted absolutely every outcome that was possible and read the book over and over again. Didn't you, Ron? So all these encounters were laid out with lines joining them, and this is sort of how the game flow graph was made. My boss was so patient with me when I was figuring all this out and how to make this make sense. So here was my first shot at a plot, and looking back now, it's so embarrassing that I submitted this at all, so please don't judge me. I was learning. My boss, bless his heart, said, "You're almost there. It's looking like there's plenty to build on there. It's just a little linear." So, in my eternal wisdom, submitted this. Wow. 3 linears. That's surely better, right? I did the same mistake 3 times instead of just once. Surely that I can get paid, right? Whoops. My boss said, "You are so on the cusp of a realization. Just give it one more go. Just one more go." And then the penny dropped.
Oh. Yeah.
Thank you. I will never forget what he said to me over Skype when we looked over it together for the first time. I wrote it down, I cried, I was so proud. He said, "You're starting to sound like a game designer, Lena." I got 3/4 of the way through the first draft of entering the copy into the game engine. when we decided as a group to let the project go. It's still, while I didn't ship the game, that's it in the engine, by the way. I'm possibly breaking an NDA there, but shh. So while I didn't ship the game, I learned more than I ever imagined that I could learn about writing, about myself, about my process. And I've been teaching that in the trenches experience with people ever since. That little IP, ironically called Second Chances, I had like 5 chances, but we'll ignore that, set my life on a trajectory that I hadn't imagined before. I like my little niche between the literary world and the games world. I like that I can jump in and out of each when I feel the need, or when necessity dictates. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight about making games, and for the chance to help you unpack some burning questions you might have later on. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. I really loved how all of your diagrams ended with catfish or earthquake.
Yeah.
Our final speaker this evening, before we go into some questions, is Scott Edgar. He's been peddling comedy music on radio, television and stage for 20 years with his compadres in the Melbourne group Tripod. Tripod are deep... Oh, this is exciting. They're deep in the preparation for the premiere of their love letter to the gaming world and gamers, the symphonic opus called This Gaming Life, orchestrated and conducted by Tripod's new bestie, Austin Wintory, the BAFTA-winning composer of Journey and the Banner Saga. I can see how much you care about this. To be performed with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra on April 17 and 18 at Hamer Hall. It's going to be massive. Scott has nursed the love of games since he first opened up a copy of Dungeons & Dragons Keep on the Borderlands module. Then, as he says, when computers were invented, forget about it. Please welcome Scott Edgar.
So I'm here as representing the gamer, which I doubt there's actually. I'm pretty sure that's games developers are a full subset of gamer. We're all gamers in this room, but from my point of view as an artist for 20 years and as a gamer, I want to talk about just a particular game experience I had with Oblivion a few years ago. Who's played Oblivion? So a few people have played Oblivion. It's a AAA game. It's a beautiful kind of sandbox kind of narrative, open world sort of game. And from the point of view of an artist, I had this particular experience which I thought was kind of indicative of my feelings about games as an art form and them finding their place amongst all the many other art forms that are out there. So, I'm a warrior. I start off, pretty much straight down. And this is about my third character in Oblivion, I might add. Like, I really wrenched the juice out of that game. I reckon I've sunk the most time of my life into Oblivion, possibly more than my marriage. I don't know. I don't know for sure. So I'm a warrior at this point, and I've decided to go on all the guild quests, which are the warrior ones, the Black Hand Club or whatever they were called, and do all the sort of mercenary quests. And that particular kind of sub-story, of which, as you know, if you've played Oblivion, there are many, many stories, takes you on this scenario where you get tricked and you believe you're killing a... Spoiler? Does anyone mind if I tell this?
Spoilers are a given.
Spoilers are a given. Good.
I write that on my board in class.
Okay.
Spoilers are a given.
Okay, good.
I'm just going to block my ears for this entire story. If you don't mind.
You want to borrow my copy later on? It's important to know. I was quite high level by this point, so I'd crafted all my everything I wore was crafted and gathered and really high, magicked up, and my weapons, everything. I was clanked when I walked. I don't know if they had that sound effect, but they should have, right? And so you get tricked into going into this village, and you think it's a village of goblins, and you kill all the goblins, right? But before you went into this village, you had to drink this particular potion. And in retrospect, you wake up the next morning with a terrible, terrible hangover, which felt verite to me, and you realise that what you've done is kill a village full of human beings. Now, as a person who's dabbled in working in making games, but also working in kind of art, I always want to see what can this game do? Like, how can I test this engine? Where can I take this? And I was also, I'd also been reading a lot of Arthurian. I was in the middle of the Mort d'Arthur. Has anyone read? A few people. It's a killer read, but it's also like a 2-year undertaking. But there's a moment in it where Lancelot kind of loses his mind out of guilt, and he takes all his gear off and runs off into the forest, wailing, and lives like a wild man, right, for like years. So I thought, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. I want to do that in this game. Can this game keep up with me? So I've done that. I've chucked all my shit on all my stuff on the ground, all my hard-earned stuff on the ground in a circle, because it's kind of, okay, like it's a bit mechanical. Like there's literally an exact radius of gear around me. And I've ran off literally in my undies into the forest in oblivion. Just kind of. Well, I did the wailing. At my end. Okay, so they have a whale button. They should do that. And so then I'm literally in my undies, this character, and I've kind of ran through the forest, and then I've kind of gotten a job as a fish killer, where they give you a knife and you have to just sort of swim and kill fish for a while, and then earned a canvas robe, and through the proceeds from my fish killing, and built my character back up over an equivalent period of time again as someone who didn't carry weapons, who knew magic, who needn't fight with anyone, who didn't wear any armour from any point from that stage onwards, and became a mage. And I loved doing that, and the game could keep up with me. And what kind of struck me about that experience as a gamer, it comes back to that idea of when an art form finds its voice is when it finds out what it can do that other art forms can't do. And this is a repeating pattern again and again throughout history. Painting had to work out what it was about once photography came along. Theatre had to work out what it was about once film came along. This is kind of the opposite. Gaming is a new art form, and all these other art forms now have to work out what they're about. But this pertains to the idea of storytelling, and I think game storytelling is very much it's an idea that's very much on the table at the moment. And there's beautiful narrative games like, for example, The Last of Us, which tell you a story and can do it really beautifully. And there's this debate. Well, this kind of people use it as an example, saying, there you go, games can tell stories. And yes, they absolutely can tell stories. But what can they do that the other art forms can't do? And to me, it comes down to this moment of giving me as a player, as an audience member, as a punter, all these tools with which to create my own stories. And I can't really think of too many other art forms that can really do that. To me, that's the point. What really excites me as a gamer about games is that idea that I'm being given a world, I'm being given a bunch of tools, and it will obviously vary from game to game, where I get to be the creative person, and I get to kind of collaborate with this art form and make something together with it. And I think to me, that's what excites me the most, and what's most sort of inspiring as a gamer and as an artist about this new art form of gaming. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. What you just said there touched upon the idea of storytelling being quite ubiquitous to all sorts of different art forms, but you're saying you feel empowered with computer games because you are creating your own stories.
Yeah.
You can literally run around with no clothes on.
Yeah, well, that's all I want to do. Just run around with no clothes on.
I've seen lots of people get on trams doing that. You can do that.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. And something I would be really excited about, and as I'm not a programmer by any means, but what would be really interesting to add to that kind of experience of creating a story in oblivion is, what if there was a game that could actually see what you were doing and recognise irony and recognise those stories and somehow reward you for your creativity as a storyteller? I'm not sure how that would happen, but I'm sure someone
It's
out
got to
there
be coming. It's
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
be coming. We call it emergent narrative.
Yeah.
when the player brings the narrative to the game, and it might not necessarily be in the way that it was authored or designed, but it's what they're bringing to it. And it's almost expected now in a lot of games to have a chance to have an emergent narrative. So therefore, the logical next step is surely to then make something that engages with the people who want to do a narrative themselves.
And that's actually a really old concept. If you look at games like Hack and NetHack, which were open source, people would write in sub-stories that didn't have anything to do with the ultimate mission of the entire game. So they would go in there and hack things, and people invented foods that they wanted to eat in the game. So things like fortune cookies, and then they filled them with messages. Yeah, that's cool.
If you want it, it'll create it. Yeah.
And you see it in another form in fighting games. I remember playing a lot of Soul Calibur for a while there, and you could actually see people's style. They were dancing, and you could pick up the same character, pass the controller along, and you would actually see a different expression of movement and of rhythm up there on the screen. So it's kind of pretty exciting.
I just love the idea that you can enter a world where everyone intended it to be played one way and you can totally change it to whatever you want.
Yeah.
I remember reading somewhere, I can't remember which game it was, maybe someone can help me, but this guy decided to play it as a pacifist for the entire game, and that just thrills me. That
I think that was Dishonored. I think.
Yeah, was it?
There was a big article about playing Dishonored without killing anyone and how that made it really different. Yeah.
Awesome. That's so awesome. I love that idea, because you can't do it with anything else. I mean, you can graffiti a book perhaps, but you can't really change the narrative so much.
Yeah.
Lena, you was talking about creating storytelling for computer games. How does it differ from text-based mediums when it comes to teaching people about writing stories for computer games?
So I took a bit longer to learn it than I think anyone I know, in terms of butting my head against all those options and giving to my boss, like, please take this. But I think when you're used to writing more traditional, and I don't want to say non-linear because it's a different thing and wars were fought, but like more traditional novel writing, let's call it that. More traditional novel writing has different rules that don't really apply to us once we add agency and once we add choice and once we add freedom of movement. For example, if you look at even in film, if you can't have that really authored composition that's really tight and deliberate. You can't have, if you had the good, the bad and the ugly, that standoff scene, where they close up on the eyes, then they close up on the spurs, then they close up on the hands near the guns, and you know what's about to go down, and there's this tension being built. If you tried to do that in a video game without making it a cutscene, they're probably going to be trying to fire into the air, see where they can go, what the walking physics like, go try and jump on a horse, go pick some flowers. You can't sort of make them do what you want them to do to have that specific thing. So agency comes in, and I say this to students all the time, agency's here to burn your house down. It's here to go, what you thought about writing? Nah, no way.
That's a lesson I learned very harshly as a high school student writing D&D campaigns as the dungeon master who kind of facilitates these stories. You're not writing stories, and it took weekend after weekend where I'd sit sharp and do all the talking before I kind of realised I'm not actually making a story. I'm making an environment with a whole lot of. I'm throwing a lot of fish hooks in the water, but it's up to them which bait they take and where it goes from there.
So it's like parenting. Basically.
I often use fish hooks in my parenting.
But a lot of conventional writing advice that we get, like show, don't tell, and all these things that are really good and help you be a better writer, don't always apply as strongly to writing interactive fiction as they do for more traditional novel writing, because you do have to tell some stuff. You do have to tell the player what they're expected to do or how they can maneuver their world, whether this be a tutorial or an NPC who's explaining to the character what they need to do, or giving them a quest, or doing something like that. We do need to tell a little bit, and we do need to, especially if the game's in it says you in the text. You have to sort of tell them, hint to them what's expected of them to do. Otherwise, you're just stuck there kind of going, oh, okay, I'm detached from this. I'm not committing to the meaning of this.
Yeah, and what's the deal with the giant time-travelling sushi? What do I do with it?
You talk to him and he's really snarky and hilarious.
Vanessa, as a games journalist on Bite Into It, have you noticed that across time the language when talking about games has changed?
Yeah, it really has. It's changed both in the technical sense and it's changed in the cultural sense in terms of being far more inclusive. Also, games aren't for children anymore. I mean, some of the games are for children, and we all know a lot of young people in our lives probably who are in love with Minecraft at the moment.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of games targeted to lots of different people, and just games are so big now that you can't talk about gamers ubiquitously or games ubiquitously.
It's almost not a big enough word anymore, isn't it? It's got all these old-fashioned overtones that don't really apply anymore to what we're trying to mash it onto.
People don't tend to say, I love reading. They tend to say, I like, particularly like this genre, but I'll dabble in that genre and I'll do a bit of this. And this is completely new and I don't even know where to place it. And that's what games are like now, that there's so many more of them.
Yeah, it's funny when you say video games, the word video is so 80s.
Yeah.
And then secondly, when I talk to people these days, and when I talk about games, I was talking about board games, but the first thing they think of when they think of games is a computer game, a video game.
Of course.
I find that fascinating. And how you say how the idea of gamers have changed. I remember watching The Simpsons, old reruns, and they used to make fun of gamers. They used to have those three nerdy characters in front of a computer, and they get so excited they have nosebleeds. But that's not what the gamers are like now.
No, it's a broad church now, and finding the commonalities between, the formal commonalities between Candy Crush and Assassin's Creed. I mean, I'm lost as far as how the same word applies.
But it's interesting to see shows like House of Cards come along and to really position one of their characters as someone who goes home at the end of a ruthless day at work and plays a shoot 'em up, and you got that, the culture's come a long way. You used to have a book on the bedside table, but now it's this.
Well, 87% of Australian households have some sort of game-playing device in their house, like video game playing device in their house. It's mainstream now. It's like we don't call each other moviers. You know what I mean? Everyone goes to movies. Everyone plays games. So that's why that name is starting to just not be good anymore. Like it doesn't tell us anything. It's ambiguous. Therefore, it's rubbish. It needs to be destroyed.
Don't be ambiguous around Lena. Really, just be clear what you mean.
Yeah.
Gee, Lena, I kind of like ambiguity, and I kind of like it in games too. Like some of the best game experiences I have are the ones where I don't really know what to do, and yes, the designer has hopefully led some hints out there, but some of the earliest games I played could have done with a bit of that. It's like, north again? I don't know. Open the thing that's in front of me?
Yeah.
Dark Souls is amazing for that. You play Dark Souls, it's not only ambiguous in terms of what am I supposed to do in the controls and which way do I go, but the whole world and the whole sort of mythos of it is just fed to you in the most kind of, tiny snippets. And it's in that space, and this applies to songwriting as well. It's in that space. It's in that ambiguous space that you bring your stuff to it, and it becomes something that is created between you and the game, which is very exciting.
Ambiguity as a device is fine. Yeah. Like as a thematic statement to be ambiguous, that's totally. I'm down with that. I'm fine with that. But when we're analysing things and trying to compartmentalise things, ambiguity can jump. Like it's the worst.
Well, we've also spoken a lot. We're describing games that create environments and worlds and storytelling and that sort of narrative. But some of the games I enjoy most evoke a feeling and get you into a rhythm. And I mentioned Duet by Melbourne developers, Commobius. And that's amazing in the sense that it doesn't really have a story, but you feel so emotional when you play it. And that is a lot to do with the music, but also to do with all the mechanics and the movement and how you have to play it. And I caught myself throwing my iPad away in disgust and then going, ooh, iPad, precious, let's not do that.
That's great.
And then there's games like The Stanley Parable, which are very meta. They're almost games about games, where you don't know what's going on, but you kind of love it because it's making fun of your experience of playing the game. Have you found that games nowadays, they don't just have to be like, your AAA plus big, marquee type games, but nowadays it's quite a personal experience. I know that you were saying earlier on that when games became online, it became this massive culture and moved away from people in their bedrooms But then again, there's also developers now who can literally make a game in their bedroom with the tools we have at hand to make really personal games which almost seem to be about what they love and their preoccupations. What are some of those individual personal games out there that people should know about?
I saw it. I live in. This is not specifically answering your question, but it's the thing I always think of on this. I live in Northcote. A lot of band venues up there. A lot of musicians live up that way. So it's very normal to see band posters around. And I was walking past a thing that was blue tacked to a brick wall, and I assumed it was a band poster. And I had another quick look, and it was just, check out this new game me and my mate have made, you know. And it's like bands now. It's like
awesome.
3 or 4 people,
That's great.
you know, or 2 people or 1. Creating art on a ad hoc basis because you wanna, you know, because the overheads are so low. I mean, I hope that the logical thing then doesn't happen, which is that no one makes money out of music anymore, and I hope that next step doesn't happen to games. But it is exciting.
Awkward. That's really awkward.
Yeah.
I won't be a downer. About personal games, I think one of the best ones, one of my favourites that I use a lot when I'm talking about games to tell your own stories is probably Depression Quest. And I'm seeing nodding heads already, like yes, represent. Zoe Quinn made that game to tell her family and friends about her mental illness and about how depression affected her life, and almost with the hopes of then explaining what they could do to help. So in Twine, if anyone's... who's made a game in Twine? Come on. Yes! Everyone else should try it at some point. It's amazing. So in Twine, it's very much like the old school text adventures. You have your passage of words, and then you have choices that you can make, things you can click on, hypertext links and everything. And in Depression Quest, you saw the options that were available to you, but some of them were greyed out. Some of them you couldn't choose. And that's because your mental illness was stopping you from choosing those things that you knew were options that you could take. But your depression stopped you from doing those things you knew you needed to do. And I think that's really powerful and a really simple way to really unambiguously say, this is how it feels. I know that I should do that. And when you tell me I should do that, I know that that's something I should do. In my logical brain, I know that. But I have this synaptic war going on in my brain that means that I can't actually do that. And I think that's something really exciting that games can do, to use that really personal platform to say, this is what my life's like, this is what my story is, this is what I would like to tell. And I think it's sort of like blogging, when blogging first appeared. Yeah. But it's so much easier to be in empathy because you're the person who's literally in their shoes.
I feel like Vanessa's example of Braid was a similar sort of thing for me. I really felt like I was stepping into someone's personal coping mechanism, like that something had happened, possibly with a woman. You are really dealing with this by making a thing and trying to sort of cathartically kind of expend this energy that you've built up in your own life. And Braid really felt like that to me.
Especially if it's about a relationship. And it had a, for those people who haven't played Braid, it had a time winding back mechanic. So you could go back and try something again a little bit differently. And to anyone who's been in a complicated relationship or had a really bad breakup or something like that, how many times have we wished we could just, pull back just a little bit? So that's a very personal way of telling that tale. Yeah.
I always think that when people invent time machines, movies always talk about, let's go back to when, the
Hitler
crucifixion, or let's assassinate Hitler. No, we'd all go back to those moments in our lives that we regretted and messed up our relationships and do the comeback to that bully that you've always wanted to do. That's what time machines are for.
There is that movie About Time. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have.
It's fucking horrible.
I know, it's awful.
I hate that film.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is being recorded, you realise.
Oh, really?
Take your clothes off, whale.
I am what I am.
And go back in time. Never said it. Gamification in everyday life. Nowadays, there's like people counting calories. There are those apps for fitness. There's all sorts of things. Do you think that our lives are now being influenced so much by the digital world and gaming that we almost treat ourselves and each other like game characters?
I don't think that's a real fear. I think that is...
Oh, good.
I think that's a bit of the... one of the responses you get to any change in technology is that fear response of how's this going to change the way we interact and how's this going to affect everything. I think they're real concerns to look at. But, often all of these things can be looked after with a little bit of the concept of moderation. And just as you don't want any kid throwing themselves into, hours and hours of game screen time, also you want to be looking at, well, where is that game pitched and, who's going to be doing that? And we want to do the same sort of thing. It's like if we're looking at being gamified at work, often I think, well, do we really need to gamify something or do we just need to design people's jobs so they're less boring?
Yeah.
Would that be a better solution?
I mean, it's a very seductive idea as well, that idea of things can be assigned a set number of points. It's not furry. Life isn't furry, And I think the original gamification idea is money. That my merit can be measured in a really clean, numerical way. I've gotten X number of points for this thing that I've done today, and there are people where that's a very seductive idea for them, and that's what appeals to them about a lot of games. World of Warcraft, for example, I've done my time in that world, and that's what it's about, man. It's an equation, and everything adds up, and you get your points, and it's all very clean and clear. Unlike life, which of course is often confusing and disappointing,
Ambiguous,
exactly.
I think when there's a lot of apps that are RPG to-do lists or something. I know that our friend Ben uses one, but I can't remember what it's called now. But it's probably good because I can't really plug it anyway. But especially with what I'm about to say, I think gamifying your to-do list as a way to calm yourself down is a positive, as a way to give yourself control over your life and your self-care and to look after yourself and to manage your work and your productivity. I don't hate that. I think that can be useful and it can be good as long as it's kind. I do get the heebies when game mechanics are used to manipulate people, especially if it's the big company manipulating the little worker into working harder and doing these sorts of things. That's when I start to get the heebies about these game mechanics that I love so much, that mean so much to me, being used in this really gross, exploitative kind of way. That's when I go, that's why I cowered when the word gamification was used. It's a visceral response. I can't control it. It just happens. I just go, ugh, it just comes over me.
I saw that when I said it.
Yeah, see? It's a thing. So I get nervous when things are gamified to then manipulate people. But if it's if it's personally for you and you find it's a way to work, that's totally cool. I'm down with that. Yeah.
Yeah. When reviewing games, this idea of the ethics of the design of the game is a really important thing. So when you're looking at people designing games for children, for example, that are freemium games, like apps sort of things, that then encourage kids to get to a point and they can either grind through something or wait for a time period to pass, or they can spend $1 and jump through a period in time. You go, well, that's designed very unethically. I think, yes, that's your business model. I don't agree with it. I think that's bad. But then there's also games like your World of Warcraft, for example, where you might say the sort of grind required to level up in that, like maybe there should be an alternative path. Maybe not everyone wants to do that to enjoy all the different artifacts in that game and, and have a certain type of experience there. So you could have a more complex discussion about how ethical that sort of design is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, World of Warcraft has that classic one in it as well, which is very, I think, ethically questionable, where they've recognised that the basic human kind of tendency to work harder for the same goal. So the ding, the going up a level, or the reward, or the little endorphin buzz happens quite often early. But then they expand, then it's more and more further apart as you go further into the game. And that's one of those ones where you're going, well, you're really hot wiring the psyche there to keep me on the hook, Actually, once I'd recognised that was what was going on, my love for the game started to fade quite quickly,
I think with ethical concerns, especially with children's games, sometimes, and it is that fear about new technology, sometimes rears up. And I'm a mum, and I'm a game developer as well. I have high games literacy in terms of I'm not scared of them. It's my job. And I still find myself going, well, you've had too much screen time today. Or I'm worried about what that's going to do to your little brain. Or I'm worried that Dragon City, which he's playing at the moment, which he's obsessed with, is nagging him and to feed the dragons, water the dragons, breed the dragons, do all these things. Like he's got to hatch the eggs and he's got to do this and he's got to do that. And he was waking up early before everyone else in the house to run downstairs to get his iPad to feed his dragons. And it became this really obsessive thing, and I started getting worried about the impact that was having. So now the iPad lives on top of the fridge. But like, but then I started thinking about Tamagotchis with me. And I went, that's the exact same thing. It used to wake me up in the middle of the night to be fed. Like it was, you know, so I kind of go, okay, maybe it's not going to turn him into some animal if I let him play this.
No, but I do think those concerns are real. And I do think you should respond to that. But that, once again, is a moderation thing. It's like, okay, are you dreaming about it? Too much. Like, this is not good. But there's the social factor. So lots of games we don't play by ourselves anymore. And when I was getting into the Quake mod Team Fortress with my, BIP clan up there, they're going to thank me for that. What the pressure was you need to get together and practice because we've got a fight against a clan soon, and this is important to some of us. I don't know why. And the social pressures to really clock some time in that and keep your skills up and what have you were just tremendous. And that really turned me off those sort of games at that point. I just went, I don't have time for this. I'm at uni. There's parties on.
I have the opposite.
This isn't going to happen. Well,
when there's a bunch of people involved, it's a fellowship thing for me, and it's that's what keeps me there. If it was me by myself, I'd probably lose interest. But having said that, I've clocked 300 hours on TF2 playing with my friends. That's probably why. If it was a solo game, like World of Warcraft doesn't interest me as much because it's a lot of solo grind. There are raids, there are group opportunities to play, but I think that fellowship element sucks me in more than repels me.
What's interesting is that the social side, those people were new to me. We met them online, my brother and I. My brother was underage. He wasn't allowed to go out and meet these strangers, so that's why he was roping the big sister in to play with him. They've all become IT professionals. We all chat now. But we can't spend that sort of time in games. So that social side is actually very real and creates really deep, long-lasting connections. People I've known for 15 years.
Well, we've played online together.
We have.
Haven't we?
We have. And we shook hands that we're going to do it again.
Yes.
Too. The deal was made.
I promised, didn't I?
Yeah. That's all right. No pressure.
I'm feeling a bit left out.
Do you want? You can play too. You can play. We've been playing Diablo 3, and mostly we're in the chat complaining about how much it's not as good as Diablo 2. That's what we spend most of the time in game doing that.
I can be down with that. I'll play Diablo 1 and 2
on a console. That game is really, don't worry.
Our final question before we go to Q&A with the audience. What are you playing at the moment that you can highly recommend us?
I have just recently worked up the sort of the stones to delete FTL off my iPad. Has anyone played FTL? That is astounding, and it's a beautiful example of the thing I was talking about before, where they slide these tools across the table, and then every story you experience is different. Often painful and frustrating, but FTL to me is just a magic piece of game design.
I'm constantly, for the last couple of years, I have this meditation device, part of my CBT, because I'm, a professional. CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, is to play Minecraft while listening to podcasts. And this is my meditation. It's normally This American Life, or Serial, and it's the clicking and the listening and the sort of zoning out from my world. I can highly recommend doing that. But recently I've started playing To Be or Not To Be.
Oh, yeah.
By Tin Man Games. Full disclosure, I have worked for them. So you can take that with a grain of salt if you wish. It's Choose Your Own Adventure Hamlet.
Oh, cool.
And it's irreverent and it's silly and it's got the perfect tone for me because I'm an irreverent, silly person. The graphics are done by Kate Beaton, who some of you may know from Hark a Vagrant, an amazing cartoonist. And it's just got this really silly world that I like to jump into and play and just muck around and be irreverent, be a bit of a brat. It's got a bratty feel to it that you don't get that in Hamlet a lot. So I find that really exciting.
My game choices are really dated, actually. I love the Internet Archive, and they, over summer, released a whole lot of archived little old 8-bit games and things, so you can go back and play all the classics. So I'm working my way through some of those. In the contemporary sense, I have an app on my iPhone which does use the idea of gamification, and it's called Smiling Mind, and it's all about gamifying the meditation experience. And I actually find it really amazing and really interesting. And I've got to show my mother. She's going to love it.
Oh, brilliant.
That is
Cool. All right, questions from the audience.
We have roving
So we have our
mics.
roving microphones. It's kind of like Oprah. Look at the chairs, the car.
Bees.
Thank you. I have one for Vanessa and, well, anyone who wants to answer it. You mentioned Chun-Li earlier. Now, as somebody who's not really a movier, I actually have gone hard into video games in recent years because I actually find it seemingly quite a lot easier to find good, even in AAA female characters, than I do in movies. Like, I'll go to the movies and be like, sexy lamp. But AAA video games have, you know, from Resident Evil, Borderlands, they have like lots of awesome ladies. Do you think my theory is based on anything? Where do you think we're at now with chicks in games?
I still think it's difficult to pick up a lot of AAA games and find a character that I can relate to. And I don't think that the male players I talk to have quite the same difficulty. I mean, fortunately for us, game playing, a lot of that is getting out of your skin and trying on something new, or a lot of games I like also don't have any sense of you as a player. They've just got, you're just whoever the player is, and that doesn't matter. Or NetHack, my beloved NetHack, which will let you choose, you know, a class like a warrior or a caveman or a Valkyrie or what have you, and lots of good female choices, and also, you know, let you make a lot of decisions about your character. But you know, the fighting games tend to be pretty good these days, have equal number of male and female characters, equally sexualised or not sexualised. So that's kind of nice, like they've found a bit of a balance there. Lots of the online role-playing sort of games like World of Warcraft, they're also quite good because they know they have to be, because they know the demographics of their audience. And there's just a lot of women playing those games, slightly more than men, I think. And yeah, but I don't really keep up with the AAAs, and you're not going to find me playing a Grand Theft Auto. And, you know, as much as I loved driving games, that's not what that game's about. You know, so it doesn't really hit a spot for me. I'd be interested to hear if you've found any great characters out there that you love, and, you know, maybe you can tell me afterwards.
Next question, please.
Hi, panel. Firstly, Lawrence, please make another season of Choose Your Own Adventure. That'd be good. I just wanted to ask the panel, like, do you believe that games can have a medicinal purpose? We were talking about depression quest before. I was thinking, like
Put the mic a bit closer. Sorry, it's hard.
We were talking
to hear
about
from
depression quest before, in the realm of kind of intellectual or developmental illnesses and developmental issues. Do you think that games could have a medicinal purpose, and how could that be implemented?
Medicinal, did you say?
Yeah, or therapeutic or something like that.
I would argue they already do to some extent. I think the potential is obviously massive, but, you know, I self-medicate with games. You know, I use it as a way of dealing with all kinds of things, you know, calming down at the end of the day, even, just as simple as that, for sure.
Yeah, I think Jane McGonigal has been criticised for not taking enough care in exploring this avenue, into sort of saying that we can use games to help people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and we're going to do it like this and this and this, and it hasn't been trialled, it hasn't been, you know, it hasn't gone through these sort of things that medicine does, you know, all these tests and all of these checks. And so she's getting a fair bit of flack from people who think she might cause harm without meaning to. And I think that that's probably a valid criticism, in that she needs to do a bit more work in getting it sort of, you know, peer reviewed and checked. But I think the intent is there to do something really special and to sort of help people with games. Most of us have a games playing device on us, on our person, most of the time in our life. If we have smartphones, not everyone has a smartphone, and that's okay. But I think that accessing, I've heard about a lot of, I can't remember the organisation now, but it's a large anxiety organisation in Australia, and they're starting to experiment with live chat on phone to try and talk you down from when you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, and or if you're feeling like one might be about to hit. I think that in the game space, you could do some really interesting stuff with that kind of on-call therapy. And I also think, from my personal experience, a meditative game like Minecraft that you can make non-violent if you need to for your meditation is definitely a way to sort of debrief from the day. You know, you can even put on, if you meditate or if you debrief with a certain soundtrack on, or with a certain, even if your therapist has done a piece of audio for you to listen to, you can do that while playing something that's not very heavy like Minecraft, where you can just click and just sort of zone out. So I think it can definitely work. Yeah.
There are researchers at Melbourne University at the moment who are doing work on Alzheimer's and experiences that, like games that people can play that can help lessen the symptoms of that. And they're really only in the testing type of phase now, but they are experimenting a lot with that. And I know it's quite different to things like your brain training apps and things, which really haven't got demonstrable effects. I know that in Japan as well, they're doing a lot of experiments with gamified devices like robotic dogs and things in aged care facilities. And that's kind of interesting because they do have some positive results about higher language retention and sort of just interaction with things and awareness. And
even in a very, very, very broad sense, games as an art form has the same medicinal potential that a lot of art forms have. I mean, I don't know how many people in this room couldn't say that a certain song got them through a certain experience, or that they found some navigation or some guidance or some interesting kind of ideas in movies or in whatever else it might be. I think that the potential there for helping us as individuals to navigate our lives is absolutely as potent as any other art form, for sure.
I can't wait to see when we're all in nursing homes, when gamers are all in nursing homes, and to see the impact that games are going to have on aged care. There's already, in a lot of nursing homes, have a Wii, and that's a thing, and it totally helps. They might not be able to actually go bowling because the ball's too heavy, but they can totally do Wii bowling because they just have to hold this little remote. And so I'm really interested in aged care and gaming, and how we're going to age with games, and how soon, very soon, there's going to be games that are being made just for an elderly audience. I find that fascinating.
When we're in our 80s, we're going to have the really strong, fast thumbs.
Yeah.
And I think our heads are going to be, our necks are going to be sort of
falling off.
Oh, like this.
Yeah.
Still swiping to the right.
Oh, wait on, that's you.
Is there another question? Oh, there's a whole bunch of questions. This is good.
Yay.
So my question was more from a game developer approach, but I could get the answer from either approach, actually. That might be very useful. So the question is, in order to make a game, is more than just like good graphics or the techniques behind it. It's a very thin line between making a game fun and making it either boring or too hard or too challenging or stressful. So what kind of advice do you have to ensure that when you're making a game that it ends up being actually fun, something people would want to do, versus a little bit too much, boring or hard?
Firstly, I don't think every game has to be fun. I think it should be engaging in some way. That's not necessarily about having fun. But if you want to make a game that's fun and you want to make sure that you're making a game that's fun, I recommend taking it outside of the digital space and testing it. So make a paper prototype or make a physical game version of your game, and then go play it with your friends in, it's a really terrible term, but meat space is what some people call
at a butcher's.
the non-digital realm. I don't know how I feel about that word just yet, but...
I prefer IRL.
IRL's problematic too, because it means that online is not real.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
So
it's very complicated,
it's like either I'm gross or I'm, offensive. I can't really win. So if you take it outside of that digital realm and test it with your friends, we do in class a lot, we take the game Grandmother's Footsteps, which is what some people know it as, but other people know it as a million different names. It's that game where you've got someone standing at one end of the room with their back turned to a line of people, and they have to creep up and she'll turn around and they have to stop. And they have to creep up and she'll turn around and they have to stop, and whoever is moving is out. So we take that game as a very basic game, and we iterate on it, and we say, how can you make this harder? Okay, you have to crawl, or you have to do it on one leg, or you have to, all right, how to make this more fun? Okay, you have
Fire.
Yeah. Confetti, glitter. Yeah. So, and then how do we make this so hard that it's not fun anymore? And so you sort of, fire. Yeah.
We've lost him.
How do we make it dangerous?
He stopped listening.
I can be a game
He just
developer.
does that
You
sometimes.
can, more fire to everything. So it's getting in that headspace where you're being agile about the design, and then you're testing it and you're seeing the impact it has on people, can really help you to make sure you're hitting the beats that you want to hit. And it's something that you might not necessarily be able to do digitally, because that involves sometimes doing 4 times the amount of code. And that's just not practical. So putting it in paper and playing it, if you can, or putting it in the physical space, I highly recommend doing that.
XCOM Enemy Unknown was paper for years before it became a video game on Sid Meier's desk. And the other, and this also pertains to what I do in my job. You try and apply all your judgment you can when you're creating a show or a piece of art, but it's really until you get it in front of people and see their reaction that you can start to sort of iterate and tweak.
Good question. Is there another? Who's next? Oh, this is great.
Yeah, a question for, I forgot your name. Would you say there's a link between programmer parents and the gamers? Because when you start game, you don't just watch a TV and I suddenly want to play games. You normally hear from a friend or from your parents. Me, myself, I also learned StarCraft from my dad, who was a programmer.
Great game.
Wow.
So I was wondering to see if there's any link that you'd noticed.
My parents are not programmers, and I'm a gamer. For me, it was the film E.T. that got me into games, because they were playing this strange thing called Dungeons and Dragons around, Elliot and his brothers were playing D&D at the start, and I thought, well, that looks interesting.
Gee, Scott, it's so lucky that you didn't try and get your hands on the E.T. the game.
Yeah.
Lots of digging.
That's right.
But your own children, are they playing games because you're playing games? In the way that is different to how when you first discovered games?
She's listening to a lot of Sondheim because of me, but I think the games part of it might... I do play games, and I play a lot with Nell for sure, but that's not unusual now in terms of this generation. It'd be a rare child that wasn't exposed to gaming in that regard.
Yeah, I think maybe at a point in time that might have been true.
Yeah.
And that's just because I'm quite old and I got into games quite early for someone my age. But I don't think that's a normal experience.
My mum hates games, so she's really proud of me. She's like, what's the point? What a waste of time. She says really awful things about games. And maybe it's a rebellion, that's what this whole thing is. Whoa.
Oh, man.
But I was born the same year as Mario, and Mario's always been in my life in some way or another. And so it was a given to me. It wasn't introduced to me by my parents. It was probably introduced to me by school friends or the people in my neighbourhood. Us neighbour kids all had... I'm a bit bossy, in case you hadn't noticed. And I arranged every house in the court to have a different console, so we all had access to each one. And
Lena for mayor.
it made sense.
Console pimp.
Thinking about it now, why didn't we all get the same console so we could quadruple our games?
Yeah.
Oh, but time machine. But I think I definitely think that my lack of fear about what video games are going to do to my children has made me introduce games to my children, for sure. It could probably easily weird me out how my 2-year-old, about a year ago, so he was 1, was playing with a magazine that I had at home, and he tried to pinch to zoom. And he couldn't understand why it wasn't doing it, and he was like, "This is crap."
Yeah.
And that, I think, if I wasn't comfortable in the game space, could have really freaked me out.
Yeah.
I think I probably would have thrown the iPad in the bin and been like, "Right, we're done." But,
That's only just that's just basic sort of cognitive. I mean, I do that now. When I have a screen, like on the plane, I'll often be jabbing at it for ages before I realise, oh no, this isn't one of them. Never mind. How embarrassing.
I try and pull down the notifications bar on my laptop, and I go, it's not a touch screen. Sorry.
I try and copy and paste from my iPad to something else.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yep.
We've got time for 2 more questions.
I fear I may be throwing myself under the bus a bit with this question because I don't know what I'm talking about. But
That's all right.
That's what we're here for.
everyone probably has heard of this. But what is Gamergate? I'm not 100% sure myself, and so there's people laughing at me already.
Don't feel bad about asking. That's totally okay.
Thank you.
Gamergate is an online hate mob that use the guise of caring about ethics and game journalism to attack women online. And if they actually gave a crap about games journalism, they'd be talking about that a lot more. So you can see that that's clearly not where their heart is. Their heart is in more women being involved in the games industry is scary to them for various reasons, or something that they might just be scared of things being done differently to the way it's been done in the past because they love the thing and they're worried about change with the thing, and that's a fairly normal human response. However, you shouldn't do crimes because of that fear. You shouldn't attack people because of that fear. It's okay to be scared, but as grown-ups, we work through our fear in constructive ways that don't harm other people.
It's so ironic too in the art form of gaming, which is all about change. It's so new. It's so learning. It's so becoming itself. It's like if there was this huge kind of movement against sound in movies. It's like
It's weird.
it is weird.
It's weird. Yeah, and it's complex. And I'm glad you felt like you could ask here. I think that's good, and Freeplay is a good spot to ask that question because it is. If you ask that online, oh my God, you know what I mean? You could get horrible things happening.
Stick with meat space. Stick with meat space.
Yeah, but Don't be too scared to approach professionals in real life about it, and you'll get the down low.
We've only got time for one last.
The front row's had none yet.
Yeah, get some love to the front row. I hope you've all got the same question.
What was your question? Okay. I thought it was funny that you brought up a point. It's something that I've thought about as well, with regards to controlling what games, like ethics in games. So in Australia, it's ethical to have a game that may cause a child to want to make a purchase, but not ethical to have a game where you kill characters that don't really exist. So I wanted to know what your thoughts and opinions were of bodies controlling what games are and aren't accessible to people in Australia.
I'm not sure I understand the question 100%. So you're sort of saying we say that it's unethical to make kids want to spend money on the App Store, but then we're not really as worried about when they're stabbing pigs in Minecraft. Yeah,
well, no, it's more about GTA gets a negative review, and Hotline Miami 2 recently is not allowed to be released in Australia. And it's a pixel game where you kill people, and it's because of the violence.
Yeah.
But then you're talking about as well ethically questionable decisions made in games that are accessible because they don't have violence. And it's funny to see that ethical
well,
line
I guess,
drawn both ways.
the classifications board doesn't really have a remit over business models. So that's where that problem comes out. But the tension's more interesting than that. And
I guess my question as well is, do you think there is a body that should govern that in a way? And analyse business models and maybe say, no, that's not okay?
I think that's up to us as consumers to be educated about that sort of thing. I mean, look, the fewer bodies that we have to go through to have a look at products is, probably better within reason, as long as safety is looked after and stuff.
Yeah, it's a fairly huge question. Obviously, you could
a really
start
good conversation.
Absolutely, you could start a whole other panel. We could be here for 2 hours talking about freedom of speech. What a nation is as far as what its ethics are for its citizens.
How people
What is
classify
evil?
sex versus violence
Yeah,
and
yeah,
those
yeah.
sort of issues, which they haven't even sorted out with films, maybe.
Yeah.
So
we've got 1 minute to cover that.
Yeah.
Right, here we go. That's a great question.
It's a really good question, and I think it comes down to the parents when it comes to kids and their access to these screens, and it comes down to making an ethical choice that's to do with your ethics as a parent and how you want to raise that child. Some parents don't give a crap if their kid wants to spend $2 on the App Store every couple of days. That's up to them. It's totally their call, and I think barring parents from being able to do that's probably a really messy way to deal with it.
For sure. And as Vanessa said, it's often about being informed, and being across what's going on, which not all parents can boast as far as games is.
No, but there's never been a better position to do that. Like we've never had more access. Like my mum's advice when she was worried about what games that I could have access to was like, you should play them first before the kids play them, and then you'll know whether it's suitable. There is no way in hell she was going to do that. So I just got given everything. Like, and I didn't get given everything. It was, I got like 2 games a year. So, but it was when YouTube and Let's Plays started coming. I've been telling parents for a couple of years now that you've never been in a stronger position to make really good decisions about what games your children have access to. We have a better rating system now than we did a couple of years ago. And it's not perfect, you shouldn't always rely on classification, but you can watch a full playthrough of a game without spending a dime on it first. And I think that's really good for parents to be able to see 100% what they're dealing with before they get into it, and that they should use all the information that they have online to make that decision about what they want to instill in their child.
That's right. And as a parent, even the fact that you're having that conversation is a really good start, you're not always going to agree either. I and my wife, of course, have an ongoing conversation about at what point my daughter's old enough to watch Lord of the Rings, but, we'll get there.
You've been telling that as a bedtime story for years.
I know, I have. It's
So why
true.
not?
Yeah,
Do it.
Just cut out that singing and the dishwashing scene there in The Hobbit. Forever. Folks, thank you very much for joining us in our meet space this evening. Please put your hands together for all of our speakers this evening. Scott Edgar, Lena Deventer, and Vanessa Toholka. I'm Lawrence Leung. Enjoy the rest of Freeplay.